Welcome to the Court of History. I'm Sean Wilentz in Princeton with my compadre Cindy Blumenthal, talking about the connections between politics, the law, journalism, and history. And today we're going to be talking about assaults on all of history and the law and politics, particularly, well, the assault on the intelligentsia, the assault on the universities, the assault on knowledge, with particular reference to the assault on the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, D.C., a very, very important research center, one that I was honored actually to be a fellow at some years ago, which you will remember, Sydney, when I was
Yeah,
down in
you were
Washington.
a fellow when I was working in the White House, and you came over. We had a nice lunch in the White House mess. We engaged in a lot of activities together, a lot of fun, and talked about a lot of the issues of the day. And now here we are again with the Wilson Center back in the news.
Indeed, indeed. The issues of the day then being the impeachment of President Clinton. While I was there, I met all sorts of extremely interesting people. One of the things about the Wilson Center was that it brought together scholars from around the world to talk about issues of lasting import. However, of course, the Trump administration decided to close it down.
Yeah,
One of those. Hmm?
you know what happened, Sean, was that in April, Elon Musk's Doge sent in four members of the team to the Woodrow Wilson Center, which is off Pennsylvania Avenue. It was the apple of the eye, by the way, of Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. It's chartered as a memorial to Woodrow Wilson, the good part of his heritage, his internationalism. And they came in the offices. They took over the systems. They told the center's president, Mark Green, a Republican former congressman, to get the hell out. And they fired 130 people.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible story, but we're very, very fortunate today to have someone who was right on the ground for all of that. An extraordinary scholar in her own right, but has a lot to say about what just happened, and that is Victoria Phillips. Victoria is the founder and director of the Cold War Archival Research Institute, the author of many books, extraordinarily wide ranging, including Martha Graham's Cold War, The Dance of American Diplomacy, wonderfully wonderful title, on the politics really of American dance. But most recently, she has been a global fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center. She is still a fellow at Oxford University, but was there and is here today to tell us something. Victoria, welcome to the Court of History.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, well, we're very, very pleased. And just to begin, Sydney told us a little bit about what happened back in April, but why don't you tell us, from your vantage point, what did it all look like?
So to me, the point of what they were doing is the evisceration of the intelligentsia through attacks that weaken but do not destroy. And I think that's a key point. They're weakened and then left to die on their own. The methods of destruction breed infighting among organizers. Survival tactics take over, and the propaganda takeover, I hate to say it, is at the most mundane levels and seeps down into the very tiny crevices, like me. But he takes over through ownership of boards, universities, and arts institutions, and then the denial of funding either through coercion or legal means. So what I saw, I run something called the Cold War Archival Research Institute, which has a long history. It began at Columbia University. It made its way to the London School of Economics. And after COVID, landed at the Wilson Center in cooperation with Christian Osterman. It was a very important move because I have a collection at the Library of Congress, believing that if it's with the government, it's going to be forever. So I thought rather than tripping around institutionally, it was home, and it was a wonderful program. We trained scholars in cooperative methods of global history, rather than believing that you can't do global history in a silo. You have to break down barriers of departments, of regional institutes, language, culture, all of that. And so the fellows literally work as a group on discrete projects, but help one another in the archive. So if I see a document that helps your project, I send it over to you. Same thing on the other side. And we work with archivists as well, and they join the conversation at the end of every day. It bridged into an institute. Ironically enough, the other part of the institute was to study humanitarian aid and the cooperation of government and 501c3s in post-war 1947 aid programs, starting with food through Care International. So we had two parts of this unit. We always, whether we were at Columbia, London School of Economics, or Wilson, we trained the students in archival practices, and then we went to Budapest to the Open Society Archives, where we studied. The original project was formed with A. Ross Johnson. It was he and I on the board, and the idea was that those who have written the history of the radios, which some credit with ending the Cold War, which I love because it could seep into the small crevices of the USSR through language and culture. As we went into those archives in Budapest and therefore became familiar with the Orban regime.
Well, Victoria, before you go into all of that about Orban and the and how he preceded what Trump has done and laid the groundwork for it.
Right.
You know, they're in Washington now. You know, this is like an old TV series that Sean and I might remember and others may not, Naked City. And they always started with, it was a police, procedural black and white crime show. And they would say in the beginning, there are 8 million stories in the Naked City. This is one of them.
This is one of them.
And in Washington, there are a lot of stories of travesties of what's happened to people. And it'd be very interesting to know, were you there during the day when the Doge people came in, or how did you learn about it? What happened? Tell us about the destruction of the Wilson Center, of which your particular program, the Cold War Institute, was only one of many important research aspects.
Yeah, so Wilson is like a nesting doll, a Russian nesting doll, and my program fell under the History and Public Policy program. So it was a doll within a doll. We knew with the executive order in March that there was trouble. There was the thought, and I always liken this to, if Hitler had just rounded up the Jews and sent them to gas chambers, it wouldn't have worked. It's got to be slow. And there was the executive order. And as people do, we thought, well, we're different. We're not quite X or Y. And while the Institute for Peace, ironically, founded by Ronald Reagan, a Republican to which these Republicans in theory aspired to be like, we watched them, and there was the thought that, well, if we just play nice, Ambassador Green knows how to play Trump games. He's worked with USAID. Okay, that's no more. That's what you do, right? You rationalize. And then in April came the call. In the meantime, little blurbs started coming out of Wilson, but I wiped my Facebook. I had my Facebook and my other outlets wiped by a white hat hacker because I didn't want anything to jeopardize my institute. So that's, to me, fascinating, and I'm a little ashamed of that. But to me, the goal was preserve the institute. That was the most important thing.
What did they tell you? Did you get a letter?
It was hinted that we might not want to say anything that was controversial, but no one came out and said, wipe yourself. I did that.
How were you dismissed?
Yeah, how were you informed?
I wasn't. I woke up one morning at 6 a.m. I believe it was a Monday, because I think they always do things over the weekend. And bingo, there it was in the newspaper. I believe on, I believe that I'm still up on the website as a fellow, which I'd really like to get taken down. And I immediately panicked because I had 12 fellows ready to go to Budapest. So we had been training since October, every other week to go to Budapest. We had almost everything paid for. And all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute. Then an email came from Wilson, from the History and Public Policy program, on which I was CC'd to the fellows that said, it's over. It's all done. My immediate reaction was, press, hold on, CC all, hold on to your hats. We're going anyway.
And what happened?
So what happened was that our hotel had been paid for and a few flights. I said, everybody go into your manifest, go into your confirmation, see if you've got your flights. Contacted the hotel, and the hotel was paid for, and we thought we had most of the flights. I said, go book your flights. Don't book them through an agency, book them in your own name, and I'll get you reimbursed. I had a 501c3 that was dormant that also did collaborative history. We'd been paying our taxes, filing our I went to my father crying, who was on his deathbed, but has since recovered, graduated from hospice. And he looked at me with blue eyes, the color of Sean's shirt, and said to me, this is the fight of your life. What do you need? I said, Daddy, I need $10,000. And he said, fine. And he gave $10,000 to the 501c3. We just started making sure that everybody had plane reservations. Juggling. Of course,
the reservations were made privately then, not through the center.
The reservations had been made through the center. Now, here's the rub. I raised money for the Cold War Archival Research Institute from private individuals. So when we were spending that money, we were not spending government money. We were spending 501c3 money. However, you never know. And the plane reservations, travel reservations that were not made clearly weren't going to happen, but 3/4 of them were made. So I thought, we're okay. We made the rest of them. One of the things I asked the students to do was use your reservation number, put it in your own name, find out your seat number, really make it specific to you. We were ready to go. We put all the Zoom link meetings on our private Zooms. We used private emails, and we were off and ready. We were supposed to all meet in Budapest on May 17th. The Friday before that, everyone had flights. Woke up another Monday morning at 6:30 a.m., opened my computer, and there's a WhatsApp from one of the students who said, my reservation is gone. Gone? What do you mean? He said, it's gone. Give me the number of the airline. Give me the number of the travel agent. Well, there was one travel agent that had booked 5 of the flights. One of them, the ticket had been used, so they couldn't cancel it. 4 others, it wasn't that they were canceled, they vanished. And that's what I found so interesting. Lufthansa said to the student, we've never seen this before. I talked to the travel agency. She said almost exactly the same thing. The reservation is gone. And that to me was as shaking and definitive a moment, because it told me we thought they were done. They had done this in April. It's 3 weeks later, and yet they're still at work over the weekends. And I said to somebody I know quite well who's on the Trump side and believes that these are the right moves. I always try and talk to the opposition to understand, particularly the intelligent opposition. And I said jokingly, but not jokingly, there must really be nothing wrong with government if they're trying to save, if they're spending their weekends to spend $3,000, to save $3,000. That's all it was for these 4 flights. So I went back to the students. I said, make the flights in your own name. I will reimburse you. I thought we were all right. Then Harvard starts. Then I realize I've got a 501c3 that does not meet the government agenda. And uh-oh. And my experience of having been in Budapest, I knew that there were very crafty ways to get to 501c3s. And then Harvard.
Yeah, 501c3, of course, is a nonprofit group. And you had been in Budapest and seen Orban's authoritarian techniques used. And now you were seeing them applied here in the United States. How'd that make you feel?
And what we saw between 2014 and the present was the evolution of Orban's practices taking hold. And my expertise is modern dance, so I first saw it there and was fascinated by it because at some point, what did he do? He took over the theaters. Then I understood from people in the modern dance community, he basically blacklisted domestic funders of modern dance. It's free, it's individualistic, it requires kinesthetic understanding. And those dancers went to Germany, where I have good friends who kind of run modern dance in Germany. Modern dance went underground. Orban reconfigures modern dance into some kind of Hungarian folk and circus. Fascinating. I found dance schools that were underground, and I took my students there last year. They're gone now. And the same thing's happening in contemporary art, contemporary theater. So I had seen the breakdown of not-for-profits in the arts area, Kennedy Center.
Of course, Trump has taken over the Kennedy Center and attacked the arts and attacked the Smithsonian and
Right.
And I had, of course, witnessed and been through the downing of Central European University, CEU, because when we first got there, CEU was alive, it was vibrant. My mother actually had a hand in putting together the medieval studies department.
This is a university in Budapest.
Right. And was funded by Soros, a beautiful building, modern glass and marble, library with all the books in it. I mean, it was really a wonderful place. And CEU was attached to the Open Society Archives. Yeah. So we do conferences that would then happen at CEU. I partnered with the West Point Military Academy. So I would bring my fellows along with 4 cadets, between 2 and 4 cadets from West Point Military Academy. So, to look at hard and soft power, because I claim you can't understand one without the other. So there was this dialogue. It was really kind of, I thought, forward thinking programming. And while I was at CEU, I'll never forget this, I was giving a keynote speech on the history of truth as propaganda in the United States. And it was during Trump's first term. I started with George Washington, Lincoln, the Cold War, truth dollar campaigns and all of these things, the kind of bastardization of truth. And then here we are with Trump, where there is no such thing. There's alternate facts. And I had somebody who followed me at that point and listened to me. And he came up to me and he said, there are cameras above and listening devices in the walls. Be careful of what you say. I knew they had been in my computer.
Well, this someone is who? Who is he? Did you know who he was?
Yeah, I know exactly who he is.
I don't mean individually. What was was he a Hungarian?
He was posing as a student at Corvinus University, where I had been offered a job. He was not a student at Corvinus University. And at one point he came up to me and he said, "I have a new job now, we can be friends," which I thought was fabulous. I guess he grew to like me. But I stood up to give this talk about the history of truth as propaganda and what Trump was doing kind of as a long American tradition of monkeying with these things. And I was very nervous at first, and then I thought, what difference does it make? But they were in our computers. We know they were in our computers. They were following us around.
At the Wilson Center or?
This was this was part of the Seawar Institute, so I was connected to the Wilson Center, but it wasn't. They were more interested in me because I was at CEU in Corvinus.
Right.
I was then hired to work at Corvinus, which is now run by Orban. They did exactly what they're trying to do at Columbia Dartmouth, which is to put people on the board. So the board at Corvinus got taken over. The funding was through some wacky oil stock manipulations, which I love because I was a short seller on Wall Street and love financial malarkey. Then COVID hit. I was supposed to teach anyway. I was supposed to teach 2 courses, one on women and gender in the Cold War, which included gay rights and this kind of thing, abortion, and the other was on the general history of the Cold War and culture. My gender class was eliminated.
Sure.
So I was right at that cusp when they were saying yes, yes, and then, COVID. Now I can nip it at the bud, right? And now what we're told is, come teach at Corvinus. I said, well, I can't teach gender. I can't teach gender. Oh, it's okay. We'll pay you really well. You can teach anything else. And it's, and we'll give you a parking spot and we'll give you money, and Budapest is a great place to live. So that, to me, that was fascinating. When I was in Budapest this last time, there was a pall over the Open Society archives because, as you know, in 2017, Orban put in the mandate so that he can watch who gives money to what. And then there's I call it a blacklist, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. In 2025, they've reintroduced proposed legislation for a transparency of public life, which is a bill that allows government to monitor, restrict, penalize, and potentially ban organizations that receive foreign funding, i.e., Central European University, should it have been there, not already have been gotten rid of through accreditation removals. But it would literally shut down the Open Society archive because it would be deemed a threat to national sovereignty. However, the Open Society archive holds U.S. government State Department archives. What happens to them? So in essence, closing that and the U.S. allowing that to be closed is like closing a small section of the National Security Archive or telling Hoover at Stanford, no one can see that collection.
Yeah. Right. So I can understand Orban's motives. And here we are at the Wilson Center, which is a leading social science center of international work and policy and history in the United States. And did any of the people who were involved in shutting down Wilson ever explain their motives? And what do you think their motives are? Are there motives that somehow you're the deep state? What is it?
No one has said a thing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
It was not that you weren't engaged in waste and fraud and all the things that Doge usually talks about.
That's right. Well, it could. I mean, that's what's so funny is it can't possibly have been about waste because it had an endowment. So actually, Doge and the government lose money by firing us. So my endowment was about $400,000. They've got to give that back. Right. So it does. So there is no. It's like the State Department Historian Oversight Board that was paid $125 a year. That's not cost savings. That's about getting rid of the intelligentsia. And I think CEU and the Open Society Archives are now at battle with one another. They used to work together. All of the Kennan Institute, the Kissinger Institute, and the History and Public Policy Institute. There was this idea we're all going to get together and go off and do something because there's something between, and I'm not privy to the numbers, $20 and $40 million in endowment that is not
the Wilson Center,
right? That is not.
That's a private endowment.
That's private. That's not. No.
It's got to be given back to whoever gave it. I'm in the midst of lawsuits now or potential lawsuits. I've been asked not to file a lawsuit. I've been in legal action, I should say, where I've said I want the money back that my donors gave for this specific purpose, which is lawful. I asked for that back in April. I get all these stories. I think there are some people who really are well-intentioned. One story was, everyone's getting their money back. Don't worry. Don't write any legal letters. Well, that's just, I was on Wall Street for too long. No. I wrote a letter. No harm in writing a letter. Guess what? It's all got to be returned. Then more. Then, well, only institutions get their money back. Individuals will be considered a gift. Nope. Another lawyer's letter. I was told recently that anything that was given last year will be given back and everything else is up for, nope. And so now I've gone to all the other donors, and I've got them engaged with my lawyer to send out exactly the same letter, because it doesn't matter when it was given. And it's this drip. Why am I spending my days when I should be writing books and writing anything, but I'm on the phone with lawyers, I'm frustrated, anxious, upset. And I think that's part of it. I think that's part of the tactic, is because as we're fighting, we can't work.
Well, this is your work now, in a way, and taking on this authoritarian takeover. And but they've also, instead of, as you pointed out, found waste, fraud, and abuse, simply arbitrarily destroyed a major intellectual center that serves the prestige, interest, and scholarship for the United States, and now got the government embroiled in legal action that will cost its money, and will have to possibly in the end pay millions of dollars.
That's right. So the government has to pay legally millions, double-digit millions of dollars back. Yet they spent their weekend to get rid of plane tickets that added up to under $3,000 to replace. So it has nothing to do with cost saving.
I would call it very inefficient. I would call it very inefficient, wouldn't you?
It's not only it's inefficient, it's a waste of time, but it means that it means they really care.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like Orban going after modern dance. I thought to myself, that's really detailed and weird. Yeah. If it's that deep, it means that all of this stuff with the bros fighting and, that subterfuge and what's going on underneath is very, very serious and not at all funny or entertaining.
And it's interesting, too. I mean, you mentioned the Kissinger Center and the Kennan Center and the things that were involved, that you're involved in, about the Cold War and so forth. I mean, these are the pillars of anti-communist foreign policy since 1947. Now, all that is off the board right now, it seems to me. I mean, now the whole Cold War is being rewritten, that the friends that we have, for example, in the Soviet Union, or in Russia rather, are bringing back those aspects that we opposed from 1947 on. I just find it, I mean, it's no accident maybe, but I mean, it seems that there's some sort of ideological aspect to this too. Maybe they're not aware of it. Maybe they don't get it, but that's exactly what they're doing, is undoing what has been the story of the West's success in winning the Cold War. They are undoing that story.
That's absolutely correct. And Orban has done that, I think, most dramatically for the public. Well, not most dramatically, but very dramatically for the public, with museums and history talks. I make my students go on walking tours of Budapest, and there's always a shred of truth. But at the synagogue, we were told that the Jews went away. They didn't go away.
I've been to that synagogue.
And then we were told that, but nobody knew they had left, because the Germans had taken them and they all lived in their own neighborhood. So how were we supposed to know they left? I mean, how many things are wrong with this sentence?
So they're into Holocaust denial as well. But
Right.
here in
Holocaust
the
denial
United
too, yeah.
States, the Orwellian rewriting of history, particularly the Cold War, which was, a very long project of, decades and generations in both parties in different ways, to somehow now, if that is the motive, to land up, to obliterate it, to wipe it out, to throw it down the memory hole, and wind up, in effect, on the other side, is 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 um, is quite a turn of events.
And I think because, because the Cold War, with its many hot wars, but as a larger Cold War was a propaganda battle and it was a battle of ideologies, it's particularly significant that it's being rewritten. For me, that this idea of the fungibility of truth, facts, all of those things is really important in all of this. So the telling of the Cold War is so difficult anyway when you're mucking about with value systems and core cultural values. It's really dangerous.
Let me ask you a question in which you can put on your Cold War scholar's hat, about what's going on now and the relationship between Trump and Putin in relationship to the reinterpretation of the Cold War.
Which is the question that was sort of back of my question too.
Yeah, that's sort of what Sean was talking about. What's your view on this?
I don't know enough about Putin, and I'm certainly not a Russia scholar. What I've seen is deeply disturbing and so anti-Republican, i.e., Republican Party, as it's like a misnomer. It makes no sense. Putin makes sense in terms of his desire to rebuild the empire, really the Tsarist empire rather than the USSR, I think. But that relationship I leave to other people. The relationship that I am more skilled at seeing, I'm writing a biography of Eleanor Lansing Dulles, who was the sister of John Foster and Allen, Foster being Secretary of State under Eisenhower, Allen being head of the CIA under Eisenhower, and then briefly Kennedy. And she basically ran Berlin, and no one knows about her. And she was like the puppet master. She had men doing the stuff and she was holding the strings. And she's a fascinating character, brought several $1 billion in to rebuild Berlin and Austria. When she was going through Germany as a young woman, she observed what was going on. And so I was in some State Department memos about what Germany looked like 1933-35. And that's where I see the parallels.
Yeah.
That's because what's really worrisome to me, having been in the finance world, is people like Jamie Dimon saying at one point at the Aspen Institute, head of JP Morgan, he was at the Aspen Institute a few years ago or within the last 2 years and said, Trump will be good for taxes and the economy. What? And it was really, and he's since gone back and forth, but it was really reminiscent to me of the wealthy businessmen, lawyers, industrial leaders going along with this. And I think Orban did the same thing. Where I find, to me, there's a playbook that is very similar, where Trump does not meet the playbook. And I know it sounds really weird. If I were Trump and I wanted to stay in power, I'd start a war. So I'd make sure to have some kind of big war, executive power. Then you get 3 terms, Roosevelt all over, Bloomberg, 9/11, right? He's got to be in power. Great for the economy.
Right.
But what Trump isn't doing is that build up to war. So Orban takes money from China, from Russia, and from the EU. So life is very good in Budapest. Things are inexpensive, quality is good, housing is great. Same thing with Hitler. They were terrible depression. Then he got them out. Blah blah blah. Trump is not doing this. So I'm wondering if maybe he's not that smart. So my hope is for a great recession that will anger people enough that somehow politically it'll turn over. Obviously, with the military action, that's not looking like as though it's going to be such a possible outcome. So to me, the following through with Orban and the Nazi Party and Hitler, I'm seeing that Trump's got to boost the economy or he's sunk unless he starts a war.
And that's also your Wall Street expertise speaking.
Right.
That's right. And that's me it's also, I've got to admit, that's me as a short seller. What I'm seeing with CWAR that's really positive is I just landed at Oxford. So Oxford just took CWAR as Cold War writing lives yesterday. And I'm writing a syllabus for next year and no one's stopping this.
Victoria, you're now part of the exile of American scholars to foreign lands. And you're probably in the first wave of American intelligence, science, medical research, all kinds of physical research, about to leave this country.
That's
and
correct.
You're leaving.
Yes, I live here. Luckily, CWAR is virtual.
Cold War, yeah.
I was living in England when I was at the London School of Economics.
You're going to go back. You're going to go take this program to Oxford.
Right, virtually. The other thing that Oxford does is that my fellows are international. So this year, 3/4 of the fellows could not have gotten into the United States. So I have to take it out of the United States if we're going to meet in person.
So the United States is cutting itself off from all of the strengths it had in the past.
That's correct. And that includes the strength and expertise that has brought medical innovation and technology and, frankly, the best war systems that we've got. It's a little frightening.
Yeah.
Well, it's, I hope your short seller self doesn't come true at this one time, and that you will indeed survive, and that we'll all survive. There won't be a grand war. Let's hope for the best. But you've been through a lot, and I can tell that you're going to keep on going, Victoria. So thank you. We're going to have to wrap it up now. We'd like to keep it going. We'll have you back. We'll talk more. But for now, thank you so much, Coraggio, and we'll see you next time on the Court of History. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
It's been an honor.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.